Mr. Herrick, I don't know the exact method of conveying, but the water in this, but either the districts, but the landowners north, sort of what we call north of the Delta in Glenn, Colusa, Butte, those counties, have water rights that run with their property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Under the current doctrine. Those water rights, it's your testimony that they would be infringed upon with this legislation passed.
That is correct.
There is a current system. If somebody south of the Delta wants additional water, they can go to those property owners and they can negotiate with them to sell their water. They can put it into the pool and they will pay them for that water. That's been used in drought and it's been used for other reasons too. Is that not correct?
That's correct, and part of that started with CVPIA, the original statute.
Right. And so that collaborative effort has worked, whether it's with a municipal user south of the Delta, or whether it's with an agricultural user, or I don't know if people bought it, well, some of it's been bought, I think, for the environmental account. So that's a market mechanism to try and flatten out or the hills and gullies of the water years in California, correct?
Absolutely.
So this legislation comes along. It would appear to me what you have here is a taking. That this legislation passes, the property values, and whatever, which I believe are, if you go north of the Delta, you look at that land without that irrigation, it's pretty tough land to grow. It's hard to think how you grow rice without the water. So those water rights are now impaired. The value of the property is contingent upon that water right. You wouldn't, I don't know why, why you'd buy the land if you didn't have the water right. So what we're really doing here is not just this esoteric water law theory of senior rights and rights running with the property and those who are on the river and those who are away from it and how those have been apportioned out over the years. We're now talking about the value of their estate, if you will, that whether they're a farming entity, whether they're corporate or whether they're family or however they do that, and the value of the property that underlies that. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's the original area of origin theory is let's not export water such that where it came from originally will be destroyed, and by overturning that apple cart, the North's future is sold. It's done. It's gone.
And in fact, you can continue that out. If you can't take all of the water out of an area of origin in the national forest, if you will, or in forest lands of higher altitude. You've got to leave water in place because, again, the water is the value of a timber holdings that somebody might have or otherwise. That's all part of it.
Absolutely.
So I find it rather ironic that some of the most conservative members of Congress who hate the federal government are now using the federal government as a vehicle to bash private property rights and the value that people have in these farms and ranches in the foothills in north of the Delta. I just recently had an opportunity to drive almost to Redding, and it's very clear the impact of what it means to be on the Sacramento River, to what it means to be on a tributary, for a whole host of reasons. And the idea that you would now just, in a fell swoop here, on a couple of days hearing, that you would sweep the value that people, the investment that they have made in that, the reliance that they have on those water rights, that the federal government would step in with this piece of legislation and essentially extinguish that right. They may get their water. They may get their water for another 5 or 10 years, but the next person who purchases that land is going to think long and hard about what the real value is and what the contingency is in the operation of that. So here you have these members of Congress using the federal government as a vehicle to extinguish the rights of other people and the property rights that they've had in some cases for in excess of 100 years in terms of the establishment of these farms and ranches that exist throughout Northern California, sort of in a crescent around the Delta, but a good chunk of it in the far north of the Delta, and then whatever comes out of the headwaters of the various rivers that flow through there. This is really a very radical and extreme proposal. It's stunning in its breadth. Again, that a small group of people would get into a room to decide that they would take whatever anybody else had, so they could be made whole no matter what the situation is. Their neighbors would pay the bill.
I agree.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair would assure the gentleman that no legislation will clear this subcommittee that in any way undermines local area of origin water rights, as long as the chair has anything to say about it.
I would hope not, Mr. Chairman. I think you understand this doctrine better than anybody else
That,
on a number of levels, constitutional and locally.
thank you. That concludes questioning under the 5-minute rule. Members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for witnesses, and we ask that you'd respond to those in writing. The hearing record will be open for 10 business days to receive these responses. And if there's no further business...
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
Might I ask that I be included in submitting questions and that they would respond? I'm not a member of the committee, but thank you for letting me, and again, thank you for letting me sit in as...
Very welcome. If there's no further business, without objection, subcommittee stands adjourned.